Hello, I'm going to explain my first unit. It is themed emotions and it is for the first grade. I'm going to start by explaining the language arts portion. The activity the students will focus on is titled Worrywart. Students will write a narrative about a chosen emotion. It can be a personal narrative, so something that really happened in their life, or fantasy, something that they make up. Students will use their knowledge about emotions to help their reader feel the intended emotion. The first exposure the students will have is they will listen and watch the feeling song, which is linked right here. Then we will list all of the emotions mentioned in the song and any more we can think of as a class. So basically we will list them all on the board that are mentioned in the song, and if any are missing, we'll list them and add them to the list. And then we will make different faces expressing each emotion and basically just discuss what emotions are and what each of the emotions we list make us feel, what faces we make corresponding with them, and so on. The second exposure will be a read aloud of Wemberly Worried. We will discuss Wemberly's feelings and how they change throughout the book. So basically, Wemberly is nervous and worried about her first day of school, and as one would guess, by the end of the book, she finds out she enjoys school, she makes a buddy, and we also talk about how we would feel if we were in a similar situation as Wemberly is in the book, which basically I know that all the students will be because they will all have all experienced not too long ago their first day of school and how they were nervous about coming back to school, meeting their new teacher, and so on. So if you want to see a read aloud that I've done on Wemberly Worried, there's a link right here. The third exposure, students will read and explore other stories based on emotion, both independently and in groups, and then we will discuss how they use the text and illustrations to understand the characters' emotions. So not only are there going to be books in the classroom library about emotion, about covering all emotions, happiness, sad, and so on, I would think I will split the students up into groups, maybe 4 groups for the entire class, and give them each a book based on their strategy group level or some skill they're trying to work on in their group. And they will focus on using the text and illustrations in the book to try to understand the character's emotions and how the author portrayed to them what the character was feeling. And then the fourth exposure goes on to drama. But before we go on to that, I'm going to explain what standards I used here in the language arts block. So first one is a writing one. Write narratives in which they recount 2 or more appropriately sequenced events, including some details regarding what happened, temporal words, and so on. So they will focus on that when they're writing their narrative. They will choose a story that had 2 or more events, so something happened first, second, and third, and so on. And they will use those words, first, second, third, last, to signal their event order to their reader. And the next standard is, with guidance and support from adults, focus on a topic, respond to questions and suggestions from peers, and add details to strengthen writing as needed. So we're focusing on the topic of emotions, and as they go through reading conferences with me, as they read their stories to their friends and peers, they're going to get suggestions, and I want them to think about them and use them to strengthen their own writing. So we'll be working on constructive criticism there and taking that in a nice way. Also, language standard, demonstrate command of the conventions of standard English, so just basically things that make writing what it is and proper, capitalization, punctuation, and so on. So we will also be using illustrations and details in a story to describe its character, setting, or events, so that kind of goes along with the text and illustrations to understand what the character is feeling and stuff like that. We have another one, identify words and phrases in stories or poems that suggest feelings or appeal to the senses. So throughout Wemberly Worried, we will be thinking of vocabulary that lets us know how Wemberly is feeling. Basically, right on the cover, we have one already, worried, and there's many more in the story. We will talk about how we can use those in our own narratives to make our readers understand what emotion we're trying to portray. Okay, now I'm going to move on to the drama section because it is our fourth exposure, and the title of our activity is Be Dramatic. I'll put the students into groups and they'll perform a dramatic reading of the books we read. So basically I see them in the groups that they were in for their third exposure and doing a dramatic reading of the books they focused on in that, and performing for the rest of the class, and the performances will be recorded, so we can definitely show them to parents and other classes and things like that. So our standards that we're focusing on are contribute to the adaptation of literacy elements, plot, or dialogue within a story for guided drama experience, identify who is telling the story at various points in the text, and read with sufficient accuracy and fluency to support comprehension. So basically, I want them to figure out what parts are important and what makes for a good story and how to include them into our dramatic reading. Also, we're going to work together as to figure out who is talking in the story and who's telling the story, who is acting out at which parts and things like that. And I want them to be able to read with accuracy and fluency so they know what's going on and they can make sure their audience also knows what's going on. Okay. On to art. So this activity is called Color Me Happy, and after I explain color psychology to the students will illustrate their stories using color to express feeling. They have the opportunity to use iPad applications, Google Slides, color pencils, paint, or any other combination of art mediums. So basically, I will explain color psychology and they will kind of be free to do as they wish. They can either pick a color and make a collage or something like that, like we did in class, to express a feeling of some sort, or they can pick an emotion and pick colors that they think, color and lines that they think express that emotion. So categories artwork based on a theme or concept for an exhibit is one of our standards. So our exhibit will have an emotions theme, and they will categorize their artwork probably based on which emotion they are trying to portray and things like that. So they will follow that. Also, they will explore safe uses of materials, tools, and procedures to create works of art or design. So they will be hopefully using the tools and materials that I give them safely and correctly to create their works of art. I've also used an ELA standard, a writing standard that connects to language arts over here. With guidance and support from adults, use a variety of digital tools to produce and publish writing. So that's if they use iPad applications, Google Slides, and things like that for publishing their writing. I can also see them using the computer to explain their thoughts for the exhibit and also publish their writing for WorryWord. Okay, now in the music section, I titled the activity Time to Dance. The students will learn choreography to a flashlight dance and perform it with the rest of the class. I will teach and lead them through the steps if you're happy and you know it. So if you're happy to know it, it's linked right here. And I will talk about how different tempos and style of music helps us decide what movements to include in that. So both of these standards go along with that. With minimal guidance demonstrate and identify expressive qualities, explore movement inspired by a variety of stimuli, and propose additional sources for movement ideas. So we will create together as a class a flashlight dance of something that we portray as happiness. Now, if we have already taught the color psychology unit, I have thought about adding that in like we did for the class. We could use yellow and things like that. If not, I think that the lesson would be just as fun if we just use flashlights and different colored, because I think they'd be excited about that. And basically everyone knows the song If You're Happy and You Know It, so it'd be interesting to hear their different ideas that they have for using flashlights to portray that happiness. Okay, I also connected the science to the flashlight because the science activity is titled Light of My Heart. As a class, we write a hypothesis about what will happen if we place things in front of a flashlight. Then we will test our hypothesis. We will use different patterns and colors of light during our experiment. We will discuss if the different patterns and colors portray emotions as well. So basically, we'll work on writing a hypothesis, and I connected that to a writing ELA standard over here. So we're focusing on a topic, responding to questions and suggestions, and so on in our ELA block. And then we will test our hypothesis. So we will see if the different patterns and colors and shapes we put in front of the light change the beam at all. So we will see if we place a different color sheet or use a different color flashlight, does that change it? Now we both know that it won't, but maybe they hypothesize that it will change if they put a blue sheet, a blue see-through sheet. Maybe they think it will completely stop the beam. If they put a pattern, what are we going to see, and so on. I also think that it would be fun to use similar things like the ink stains that are used for psychology, putting things like that and simple shapes like smiley faces and hearts and stuff to see if they think that would portray emotion and what emotion. So it would start a good class discussion about that as well. So the standard is to plan and carry out an investigation to determine the effect of placing objects made with different materials in the path of a beam of light. So the different materials would focus on the different lights would be probably through a translucent material, the different patterns might be through one thing, the pictures might be a paper, and so on. And we would hypothesize about how they would all affect that. Moving on to the math section, we have the activity, how are you feeling? The class will collect data about how they are feeling each day. We will create a graph and analyze that data. They could also collect information from another class to compare as well, which I think would be a fun idea. It gets the class out of their classroom and kind of seeing the school and seeing other kids in the school. And also that would make sure we'd have some good data because the other class probably wouldn't be learning about emotions. So they could just talk about what they felt that day. And this picture kind of depicts on what I feel would happen. Each kid would either put a sticky note or maybe write each day on how they feel. And then my class would come in and we would organize, represent, and interpret that data, ask and answer questions about the total number and how many in each category, and so on. So we would talk about it each day. Maybe we'd say, oh, the third grade class is feeling really happy today, or they're really tired today, and so on. And then we'd look at the data over the entire time that we collected it to see how they felt overall. We would also be working on adding and subtracting within 20, demonstrating fluency for addition and subtraction within 10. So that's kind of me just thinking about when they're organizing and representing that data, how are they going to be doing that? What math skills will they be using? And I could just picture them adding and subtracting up each of these categories to figure that out. And then finally, the social studies section activity is titled We Are History. So I will tell the students a personal story about an emotional event I have experienced. I will tell them what happened first, second, third, and so on. So using that temporal words here that I mentioned right here, first, second, third, making sure to mention that. I could tell a story that connects back to where I'm really worried about how my first day of school I was worried too, my first day as a teacher and so on. I was nervous to meet them. I will explain that. I will also explain that because it happened in the past, it is part of history. Then the students will pair up and tell each other stories where they experienced an emotion. It could be the same one they used in their narrative stories up here in Worrywart, or it could be different ones. It kind of depends. I'm sure they have lots of stories. They would fill out a timeline to explain the order of events to their partner using temporal words. So they would create a timeline similar to what we do in history, a timeline of how things happen and to explain things better. So they would create a timeline. And then they would be covering the standard, demonstrate chronological order using events from their own lives. So they would be using their own lives to explain history. So basically that's my unit, focusing on emotions for first grade.